The floorboards of the Dusty Bell Saloon were always cold at night, especially for bare feet. June Delane knew that better than anyone. Every evening, while the piano cried out tired notes and drunken men laughed too loud, she walked those splintered wooden floors with nothing but thin skin between her and the pain. Shoes were a luxury she had stopped dreaming about years ago, right around the same time her mother was buried behind the church and her father's debts became her own. She was 22, but her eyes carried the weight of 50 winters. Each step reminded her where she stood in the world, below everyone else. Men didn't look at June as a woman. They looked at her like a thing that belonged to the saloon, like the cracked glasses she washed every night until her fingers bled. Some whistled, some grabbed, some promised help and disappeared before sunrise. And every time, she learned the same lesson again. Hope was the cruelest thing of all. That night was no different until the room went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes slowly, the kind that slams into you without warning. June felt it before she heard it. The laughter died. Chairs scraped backward. Even the piano stopped mid-note. Then the door opened. The man who stepped inside didn't rush. He didn't look around nervously like most strangers. He stood tall, filling the doorway like something carved out of stone. Dust clung to his coat. His hat shadowed a face marked by sun, scars, and years of hard decisions. Boone Maddox, the giant cowboy every woman whispered about and every man feared. June had heard the stories, how he ran land bigger than some towns, how he broke wild horses with his bare hands, how men twice her size had walked away from him shaking. They said he never married, never begged, never lost. And now he was standing in her saloon. His eyes found her instantly, not with hunger, not with cruelty, but with something far more dangerous, certainty. June tried to step back, but her foot caught on a broken plank. She stumbled, steadying herself on a table. For a moment, she expected laughter. Instead, Boone Maddox walked toward her. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. When he stopped in front of her, the room felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself was waiting. "You're barefoot," he said quietly. June swallowed. "Sir." He looked down at her feet, bruised and raw, then back into her eyes. "You shouldn't be suffering like this." She almost laughed, almost cried. Before she could speak, he said the words that would split her life in two. For a long moment, June Delane thought she had imagined his words. 5 sons. Never suffer again. Men had promised her things before, small things. A meal, a coin, a night without fear. None of them ever lasted. But this was different. This wasn't whispered in the dark or slurred with drink. This was spoken out loud, in front of everyone, by a man who looked like he never spoke unless he meant it. June's hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the rag she held. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice barely steady. "You don't know what kind of woman I am." Boone Maddox didn't smile. "I know exactly what kind you are," he replied. "The kind who keeps standing even when the world keeps pushing her down." The saloon owner cleared his throat nervously, but Boone ignored him. So did everyone else. No one dared interrupt. This wasn't a conversation. It was a turning point. June looked around the room. The same men who laughed at her every night now avoided her eyes. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. She felt suddenly exposed, like her life was being weighed right there on those filthy floorboards. "And if I say no?" she asked. Boone leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Then tomorrow you'll still wake up barefoot, still paying debts that were never yours, still being touched by men who don't see you." The truth of it struck harder than any slap. June had dreamed of escape her whole life. She'd imagined wagons rolling west or some kind stranger rescuing her. But dreams were gentle eyes. This was harsh, heavy, real. "What happens to me?" she asked quietly. "Not your land, not your sons. Me." For the first time, Boone hesitated. "You become my wife," he said. "And under my roof, no one will ever lay a hand on you without your permission again." That night, June didn't sleep. She lay awake in her small room above the saloon, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the building creak with every gust of wind. She thought of her mother's tired hands, her father's broken promises, the years she had spent shrinking herself just to survive. At dawn, she made her choice. By noon, she was riding beside Boone Maddox, the town disappearing behind them in a cloud of dust. His ranch was larger than anything June had ever seen. Rolling land, strong fences, horses that looked as proud as their owner. People stared when they arrived. Some women whispered. Some men scowled. No one questioned Boone. Life with him was not gentle, but it was safe. He didn't touch her without asking, didn't raise his voice, didn't lie. And slowly, painfully slowly, June learned how to breathe again. The first child came during a storm so fierce the sky looked like it was tearing itself apart. A boy. Strong lungs. Strong grip. Boone stood silently by the bed, his massive hands shaking as he held his son for the first time. June watched something shift in him that night. Something softer, something human. The years that followed were not easy. The Wild West never was. There were droughts, raiders, long nights where fear crept back in. But with each son, one, then two, then three, June felt herself changing too. She was no longer the barefoot waitress. She was a mother, a wife, a woman whose suffering had not been erased, but transformed. By the time the fifth boy was born, June stood on her porch, shoes on her feet, children at her side, watching the sun set over land that finally felt like home. Boone Maddox had kept his promise. But what no one ever talked about was the promise June had kept to herself. That no matter how harsh the world became, her sons would never grow up believing strength meant cruelty.